Hi there. So, welcome to part two of my long COVID story. As I said before, I'm 32 years old and I'm a physiotherapist, and I got COVID back in October. So, today I wanted to focus on brain fog, which is probably quite ironic because today I'm not really functioning very well. So, it'll be good for people to, I guess, see kind of what that's like. I decided to try and do this video in the morning, but I currently feel absolutely knackered. So regardless of what time of day I did the videos, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so brain fog is a term that you probably will have heard used by quite a lot of people. It's a nice collective umbrella of everything that kind of goes on cognitively. So within your head, it's just an absolute disaster. I can't really find any other words to kind of help describe it. To be honest, everything's just very jumbled. Everything tends to be mixed up, and just you really struggle to find words. You end up talking slower than normal. You end up taking lots of pausing moments because you think, is what's going to come out of my mouth the right thing, or am I going to sound really stupid? Um, which is so frustrating, especially when, well, I mean, I would usually function at quite a high level in terms of explaining things to patients. So I like to think that I come across quite well spoken usually, and I can get my words out and I can make sense. But at the moment, that's really not the case. Well, it is sometimes, but not all the time. And I kind of need to. It's difficult because it can be very upsetting when what you want to say doesn't come out, or if you're speaking to somebody that you've not spoken to in a while, or maybe somebody that doesn't really know you that well, it can be it it can be really upsetting. So if if you know somebody who's going through this, be really mindful and don't get frustrated with them if you feel it's difficult to have a conversation with them, because it's really difficult to actually have a conversation with anybody, to be honest. I remember when I got to a point where I was speaking to somebody that wasn't within like my daily comfort bubble. So like I would constantly be on the phone to my mum every day. I would be speaking to my partner every day because we live together. Anybody else I spoke to on the phone fairly regularly would be like maybe one of my aunties or something. But otherwise, I was more texting. And texting for me at the time was great because you can take your time to text. Nobody's sitting there with a stopwatch going, "Oh, she's not text back yet." Um, well, maybe they are. I don't know. Some some people want a prompt response, um, but certainly I found that I couldn't focus for long enough to actually reply there and then. So sometimes I would be like, I'll come back to that later. But also I'd completely forget to go back and text that person back. So I'd be like 2 weeks down the line going, sorry, I've just got round to actually reading your text for the first time because I couldn't process any of the information. Oh, sorry, that's my buzzer. How do I pause this? Pause. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Postman. Uh, I actually can't even remember what I was just saying. So forgetfulness is actually another one of the brain fog symptoms, which again is one that's really scary because I've never been the kind of person that forgets things. So the fact that I couldn't retain information and I had to write everything down. And if I didn't write it down, then it wasn't going to be happening because there was no way that my brain could keep that information for any longer than just I would be told it, and then it would go straight back out again, because it wasn't something that my head could deal with. Um, and it was really scary, because you think, oh my God, is this what somebody who is developing like dementia feels like, where you start to forget things and then you get upset that you've forgotten something. And it's really difficult, and you think, is this actually going to get better? And I can tell you now that it does definitely, the brain fog does settle eventually and does get better. So please don't panic. I know that you don't. I know that I certainly felt like I wasn't myself. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. If like you just don't feel like yourself. But you don't have a clue what's going on, and you don't know when it's going to get better, or if it's going to get better, which I found really difficult, and that definitely did kind of grind me down and brought my mood down and made me feel just crap, really, like really rubbish. So I guess my main kind of message to people on that point of view is, you're not alone. You're not losing your mind. It's it's the brain fog, and the brain fog will demist, it will defog, and it will get better. Um, when I can't really tell you, because everybody's totally different, but just don't don't get too worked up about it, because the more you think about it, the more it's gonna kind of eat away at you, and the more it's gonna affect you. So just remember that you need to rest, and let this run its course. Also, from a brain fog point of view, I really struggled to concentrate on anything. So I remember sitting in front of a jigsaw and being like, right, okay, I'm going to do this jigsaw for like the next half an hour. And after 10 minutes, I would just be staring at the jigsaw in space and not actually thinking about what I was doing. And I would be getting really tired. So any sort of thought process or concentration process, I couldn't deal with for longer than 10, 15 minutes. Now it's a lot better. I can manage up to about an hour before I switch off, depending on what the task is. If it's something that's quite complex and I need to really focus, then I'll lose, I'll get tired quicker, and I'll lose focus sooner. So I can't just say like, oh yeah, my concentration lasts 1 hour. It really depends on the task that I'm doing and how demanding that is for me. So some things are harder than others, and definitely things like reading a book is an absolute challenge. I still find that I get headaches after reading a book, and I can only really read like a few pages at a time before I have to stop, because I can feel my head starting to get sore, because my brain's having to work. My brain's having to to look at the words, it's having to make sense of what the words say, and then it's having to like piece together the story and be like, all right, okay, yeah, this is what's happening. So that reading a book is actually very complex. And I know you're like, what? Like you just pick up and you look at it and that's it. But no, you need to be able to read the words that are on the page, which sometimes is jumping all about the place. So one thing that somebody did suggest to me was getting a bit of paper and like blocking off the line that you're reading, so you're just taking it down as you're kind of reading it, which is very, very helpful, but again, very, very tiring. So I've totally lost my train of thought there, which often happens again with brain fog. So basically, other things would be, you can only focus on one thing at a time. So, for example, television's on in the background and you're trying to reply to a text message. I couldn't focus on replying to the text message because there was something else going on in the background, and I couldn't multitask. I couldn't focus on more than one thing at a time. So I would have to turn the television off to reply to a text message, or I'd have to like go into a different room that was completely silent again just to reply to a text message, which is nuts. But it's just, there's just too much going on from like a multi-sensory point of view. You can't cope. Um so again, I would say try and make sure that you don't end up in that situation, and try and manage it as best you can. So if you feel that you can't focus because of something that's distracting you, then remove yourself from that situation. I realise that not everybody can just turn the television off, because whoever else is in the room might be like, are you serious? Like, I was watching that. So you might have to remove yourself from the room, just to get that peace and quiet to do whatever it was that you were doing. Uh, I know I certainly can't read a book and have a radio in the background or have the television on the background, anything like that, because I just can't focus. So loss of focus, loss of concentration, you forget things, you feel, what else? You can't find the words, which is really frustrating. Lose your train of thought very often, and I certainly talk a lot slower than I usually would, because I'm trying to think about what I'm going to say next and what's going to come out of my mouth, and pray that it makes sense. And also processing information is an absolute mission. Um, it's like if you're having a conversation with somebody and you're like nodding your head and you're taking it in, and you're kind of like, yeah, 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 yeah. I would usually interact like that, but I would find myself listening and then being like, oh my God, I've totally glazed over and I've no idea what that person just said. I don't really feel like I want to highlight that I'm no longer switched on or listening anymore. And I feel like I'm actually getting really tired. And you start thinking about how you're feeling and you're not listening to the actual other person at all. So I would say to anyone that's in that situation, like that's that's having the conversation, if you notice the person starts to like glaze over, uh, just maybe stop, because they're not going to take it in and they're going to worry that they're being ignorant, which is not the case. You just can't focus any longer, and your brain's switched off. So please, please, please be mindful of that when you're having a conversation with anybody. Also, being on like the telephone or Zoom videos are very, very draining. And I know that I'm the kind of person that usually would be yawning my head off. I knew that the minute I'm sorry. I knew the minute I said that was going to happen. Um, but my friends are so now used to me. If I'm on a video call, I'll just be like, yawn, 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 yawn. I don't even apologize for it anymore, because everyone knows it's just kind of part and parcel of how I'm going to be when I'm on something like this. What else did I want to say? No idea. That's terrible. I'm going to pause. Sorry, I don't want the video to be longer than it has to be. So if I look like I'm totally losing the plot and can't think of what to say, then I'm going to pause it until I can find my words again. So two more things that I really did want to mention. One was the fact that as the brain fog starts to lift, it's almost like your brain switches on, and it does it at the most inappropriate times. For example, you're getting ready to go to bed, and all of a sudden your brain's like, oh, so tomorrow I'm going to do this, this, and this, and oh, do you know, yeah, I've not contacted such and such about whatever. So your brain just starts like going into overdrive for, I don't know, for like all the time that it's not been switched on. And you think, oh, well, this is great that it's switching on, but now I can't switch it off. So I certainly struggled with like sleeping. I was like, I'm lying here in bed, I'm absolutely knackered, I'm exhausted, but I can't switch off because my brain's like, "Zzz." So be aware of that. uh, yes, that's definitely something to be mindful of. The other thing that I wanted to mention is the fact that when you feel like this, you feel very vulnerable, because you've no idea what's going to come out of your mouth. You've no idea how people are going to react to you. Are people going to think that you're just like some total dafty? Are people going to try and avoid you? Um, I certainly, it's really difficult to deal with, and like I say, you feel vulnerable and I certainly got really upset. I remember my neighbour saying to me one day, like, "Oh, hi, how are you? I've not seen you in like, I think it was like 8 weeks or something, or 6 weeks, can't remember, not important. But first time I'd seen her in a while since I'd had COVID. And she was like, "How are you doing? How are you feeling?" And I went to speak, and the words that came, I was like, "Oh my God, I've not actually described to anybody how I'm feeling or what I've gone through out with like my wee comfort bubble." And I couldn't get the words out. I spoke, but the words came out in like the wrong order. And I was so embarrassed and I cried. Like I started to kind of well up. And luckily my partner was there and kind of changed the subject or kind of spoke on my behalf because I just couldn't face sharing that experience at that time. I couldn't find the words and I got so upset and I went in the house and I cried. So it really does make you feel vulnerable, and it's just something to be mindful of. So these symptoms will settle, but I guess this is just a wee kind of informative video to say, here are some of my experiences, and I hope that it helps. Also, the forgetfulness will get better because I remember the first time I forgot something and I was like an absolute maniac going, "Oh my God, I remembered what I forgot." And people are like, "Uh-huh, like, is that a big thing?" And I was like, "Yes, it's huge." Um, yeah. So, so as I say, like, I remember I had, when I started to get recall back, I'd like gone out to meet a friend for a walk and I'd forgotten her Christmas card, but I remembered before I left the house that I'd nearly forgotten the Christmas card and got down and was like, "Oh my God, I forgot your Christmas card, but I remembered it." And she was like, "Uh-huh." Um, I just found that absolutely brilliant. Like I was buzzing, absolutely buzzing, because I was like, I'm not going mad. So just remember that you're not alone. You're not going mad. This is something that happens by the sounds of things to everybody with long COVID. Um, and I hope that listening to some of my experiences are helping. So that is the end of part two. Uh, and hopefully I am a bit more flowing in my conversation when I do my next video. Okay, thank you and goodbye.